Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. It's been said that music can heal, the arts can heal, and I've seen that with great evidence in talking with this gentleman who is the man behind a wonderful organization in the greater New York City area, Baltic Street Into Action. They're doing so much to help people heal in all different areas. People who have mental challenges, might be incarcerated, whatever the challenge is, the arts are helping them. Today, as part of the arts, we're going to look at how poetry can help those heal. Before we even get to that, let's welcome him and his guest. Peter Jampel joins us. Welcome. How are you doing, Peter?
Steve, I'm just fine. Thank you. And it's good to be with you again.
You always bring so much positivity, insight to all of us every time we get together, but you also bring some very interesting people, and we're going worldwide with our guest today. Tell us who that is.
Well, speaking of positivity, I think Anna Sevchu represents a positive force in a country that has experienced much suffering and trauma. And Anna is, her background is in communications, journalism. She's a writer. She's a folklorist. She's a performer and a volunteer now, working in Ukraine with veterans and their families. And Anna's work is being supported by the National Association for Poetry Therapy, which has been offering training in the use of poetry and imagery to create an alternative way of expressing the horrors of war and its impact on the victims of the trauma that they are experiencing. So, Anna, thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad that we were able to make this happen.
Thank you so much for your invitation. It means a lot for me. Thank you so much.
Yes. So, Anna, perhaps we could just start with your own background and how you moved from your work as a journalist and folklorist and communications major into a volunteer working with wounded veterans and their families.
Mm-hmm. First of all, I am an artist. I am creating performances, writing reviews on dance and theater, practicing contemporary dance in my free time, also playing the piano. I have been writing poems since childhood. I have practiced Ukrainian folk songs and dances. I instinctively always knew that art helps to heal. And during the full-scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine, I organized various fundraising activities to support our army and had many conversations with the soldiers' families. There are also military members in my family, of course. I realized the need for knowledge in crisis psychology. I took several courses and then learned more about poetry therapy. I met wonderful people from the National Association for Poetry Therapy, Dr. Sherry Reiter, Dr. Nicholas Maza, Catherine Tangis, and I started my training with Dr. Sherry Reiter as my mentor. Group workshops for me are like a breath of fresh air. I use writing practices, sometimes involving music, drawing, photography, and movement. And the way art heals me, nothing else can.
I'm intrigued here. Now, we've talked about how music can make a difference, performing music. We've never talked about poetry. But what is it that's so healing and therapeutic about poetry? Is it the expression? Is it the words? Tell us.
Mm-hmm. Very often people are not ready to talk about their traumatic experience, especially veterans, but they are willing to write, to draw, create collages, and listen to relaxing melodies. I always say that each of us has our own key. For example, for me, writing is like what Dr. Shay Reiter calls writing away the demons. When you write, you bring up certain layers of the unconscious and gain a deeper understanding of yourself. And through dance, you can see bodily blocks, and that also reveal a lot of new insights. Okay, let's talk about more about the examples.
Sure.
Wounded soldiers and veterans, as a rule, are not willing to engage in what is traditional called therapy. However, they are often open to writing with a writer or participating in artistic practices. They may initially speak very little but write more. However, with each writing practice, they gradually open up more. Here's something I rarely share with anyone. In the hospital, I bring a huge heavy backpack filled with various materials. It includes scissors, glue for collages, 3 or 4 different workshop plans with writing practices, and paints, pencils, markers for drawing. I also bring a laptop to play relaxing instrumental music. Thus, I choose the workshop to conduct based on the participants' requests. Sometimes they want to draw. Sometimes nobody wants to draw and only wants to write. Sometimes they argue about the music. Some find relaxation in it. Others prefer rap or rock, but you should see how much life there is in these debates. It would be arrogant to go with the fixed workshop plan and impose activities they don't want to do. My approach is to always pay attention to their requests, their mood, and the topics that concern them. I do the same work with my soldiers' spouses on my workshops. It's a multidisciplinary approach focused on people. People are the greatest value, and that's what VAR teaches us in Ukraine.
Yeah.
They all want to be heard and accepted. In my understanding, the trauma of war sounds like the question, do you understand me? This is the question I see in the eyes of soldiers and veterans every time. And for me, it's not about practical understanding, because I will never literally understand what it's like to be in their shoes. But I can show that I am there for them. And I will listen and accept them with their experiences, and that I respect them unconditionally for who they are, with a lost leg and an injured hand, a blind eye, without an ear or intact, without a home or family, with a home and family, older or younger. And honestly, any support from abroad is also perceived as I am remembered. It feels like an attempt to understand my pain. It feels like I am not alone. So the most important thing that poetry therapy provides in working with war trauma is externalization. We no longer feel fused with our trauma and become one entity. But that's not the case. Poetry therapy allows us to write away the demons and see that I am me and everything else is what I had experience. The facilitator's task is to be a guide and to demonstrate totally acceptance. Mm-hmm. Art is the ability to multiply unconditional love by demonstrating acceptance, because there is no such thing as a bad drawing or an insufficiently good poem. There are people and they need to be heard. Usually before a workshop, I hear from participants that they feel like they can't write poetry or prose. But in 99% of cases, they do write. And in the end, they are surprised that they actually like their own text. For example, one soldier, Serhiy, wrote about aggression. when we were doing the exercise by Ruth Gendler called personification, where we write about one emotion as it were a person. And I have the permission to share this poem with you.
Oh, wow.
If I to share, yes.
Thank you.
Would love that.
Thank you. Aggression. Aggression is the man dressed in black, something like a long coat and a hat. He is calm by himself if you do not touch him. He is calm by nature as long as he is left alone. He walks with a cigarette in his mouth and his head bowed, looking gloomy with his hands in the pockets. He speaks little or not at all with people. He eats mainly fast food. He lives alone and has no family, children, or relatives. He buys newspapers. He has no hobbies. In his free time, he sways in a chair, smokes, and thinks about something. It's a moody type.
Wow. So that was written, did I hear that correctly, by a soldier?
Yeah.
Wow. No.
Yeah.
Did you detect from him, Anna, that he surprised himself that came out of him and that expression?
Yeah, he told me that he can to write poetry or prose, but he was surprised.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
think all the people are talented.
I want to share with you. I write a journal now.
Mhm.
I resisted it for the longest time, even though I knew it was a good thing, just to bring feelings out and express. Started it about a month ago. It has been the most wonderful thing. I feel like I have more clarity on situations. Now, I don't share it with anyone. Maybe at some point I'll take that step and write a poem. But I can see now why this is so beneficial in expressing oneself through words. I didn't understand it. I didn't get it until I did it myself.
You know, I think all of us have had some experience with writing our thoughts and feelings, a journal, letters, or email,
Sure.
and communicating through the power of words. Anna, could you say a little bit more about what the reaction of the person who wrote that poem was to his own poetry, and how do you work then with those thoughts and feelings that he's expressed?
Mm-hmm. It was about my really interesting case of all my group facilitation, because it sounds like my client, younger soldier, who had been injured at the front line and was now working as an instructor in a military unit, reached out to me over a year ago with the problem of alcohol abuse. There was also aggression and abuse towards a woman when he was intoxicated. And we wrote this poem and worked more with aggression and alcohol addiction. Yes. And in the first months, he required support almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
This is only case where I provided full psychological support for one soldier. I periodically checked in with him for feedback, and a week ago he told me that the writing practices helped him climb out of the emotional pit he was in. He was under a lot of stress and felt depressed. Around 100 people he fought alongside died on the front lines. This is a person who has witnessed many deaths and losses. He also had a difficult childhood with abuse. And in this specific case, I did not use diagnostic tools. But in my ongoing work, I do administer skills for PTSD and also a test for reactive anxiety before and after conducting group workshops.
Mhm.
The results vary, and I cannot make any definitive claims based solely on the diagnostic tools used with 80 participants for PTSD in Ukraine as a whole. But I can say that after the workshops, the level of anxiety is significantly lower. And this client I worked with a year ago is now providing me with feedback that after his physical rehabilitation, he needed support to overcome a severe depressive state and start living again. He still didn't have long-term plans, but he was already trying to dream. He says that it took him a year to feel the passion for life and constantly set new goals to regain the sense of purpose he once had. Through poetry therapy, he reduced his alcohol consumption and improved his relationships with his family. And he no longer returned to the emotional pit.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about the diagnostic process? How do you use the written word to understand the underlying difficulty or disorder or stress reaction or post-traumatic stress syndrome? What does that diagnostic process look like?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Honestly, with diagnostic, it's a little bit difficult sometimes because in Ukraine we have a really big problem. Many stories about unqualified psychologists in military units who simply provide diagnostic tools such as 200 question test, even though they are certified psychologists. But when I go to the hospital to work with the wounded and they hear the word therapy, sometimes they become scared. I honestly tell them that I am an artist and writer, and I simply offer healing art practices. And it works. But of course, I took my second higher education, and amounts I will defend my master thesis. Even I know one awful story about the soldier who said that dozens of soldiers from his battalion were killed in front of his eyes, and his friend died in his arms. And the psychologist just questioned him about what happened, all the details, wrote it down in some report and left. The soldier says it's like digging up the pain and leaving him with it. Those I do not really often use the diagnostic tools on PTSD, but I usually use more tests on anxiety. Also, I use some tests on depression for soldiers' wives. Yeah, and I have some outcomes when I worked with soldiers during 3 or 4 months. These diagnostic tools, even about PTSD, have great results without any depressive symptoms or PTSD.
Yes.
It's really work, but it's like complex work because everything has an impact.
Yes.
Quality, yeah.
One of the things that stands out to me about this process is the humanity of recognizing that people who are suffering as this young man has, should not be treated in a cold and disinterested way, but need to be approached in a way of common shared humanity and dignity and respect, and that the use of poetry and the way in which you bring your own warmth and feelings are very much part of the approach of recognizing that we're dealing with human beings who are suffering, who we must embrace and recognize, and not just diagnose from a distance and leave them there exposed and incapable of dealing with the feelings, thoughts, and experiences that have been unearthed. That there's a capacity that poetry and the sensitive use of music and the arts have to support people and help them feel our connection to them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I agree up to your point. You are doing externalization and try to recognize your feelings, your experience in general. Yeah.
It's fascinating how this whole process works, because it's unlike a therapy session where you're speaking with somebody and you're trying to get something out of them to try and diagnose or learn. You're allowing them to express freely what's within, and so much more, I'm sure, comes out. Your work is so important, Anna, because it's my understanding that in the Ukraine, there is a shortage of healthcare providers right now. And I do want to share with you, I know that because I have a close friend who is a children's book writer and uses an artist in the Ukraine. And that's how she has gotten through a lot of the turmoil there. But my friend took her and her husband under her wing, got them a visa, brought them to the United States, and they're now living in Florida. And she made that because they were in the war situation. I won't even get into the detail. So I'm somewhat connected with everything you do. Peter, this is another eye opener of how the arts can help heal. Can you tell everybody more about Baltic Street into Action?
Well, I would like to let our listeners know that Baltic Street into Action has just awarded a $2,500 grant to the National Association for Poetry Therapy to support the Ukraine Poetry Therapy Project in recognition of the wonderful work they're doing, and in recognition of the need for resources to support the training and the logistical operation of work such as Anna Sevchu. So I'm very pleased to let you know that about Baltic Street into Action's support of your project.
Wow.
This is exciting news. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your support.
So Anna, I'm so glad that we're able to share these stories of your work and of the people that you're helping in Ukraine. I do hope it opens people's eyes, hearts, and pocketbooks to support this work. It's not, and I know that President Zelensky is aware of your work, supports your work, and that this has made a difference in terms of the recognition of the use of poetry and the arts in Ukraine. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Before we go, website, Peter, can you share for Baltic Street?
Yes. BalticStreetIntoAction.com is our website. We welcome your comments, thoughts, and donations.
Wonderful. Thank you both for being here today, opening our eyes to, again, another example of how the arts heal. Truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For for nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.